Hello, folks. This is attorney Mark Thomsen. This is your Paul Revere show. Welcome to Civic Media Radio Network, broadcasting across Wisconsin every Saturday at 3 p.m. Folks, we've been here pushing Wisconsin forward. The theme is Forward Wisconsin. How do we maintain a progressive, free, open democracy? I am just honored and privileged to have Stephanie Bloomingdale back. She is the president of the AFL-CIO in Wisconsin. Hello again, Stephanie.
Hello, Mark. It's great to be here again with you.
Yeah. How about just giving, my listeners a little bit of your history and how you got to this position that you're in?
I'm the president of the Wisconsin AFL-CIO and have held that position since 2018. And before that, I served as the secretary-treasurer. And before that, I was with the Wisconsin Federation of Nurses and Healthcare Professionals for about 17 years. So really, my heart is all about making life better for working people. And I truly believe that the labor movement and unions are the best way to do that for working people.
I agree with you 100%. For folks that may not know me, I was a steel worker for 8.5 years, USWA Local 1010 out of East Chicago, Indiana. Before we got rift, meaning my plant shut down back in, it's a long time ago now, but, in 1982, I got elected. I was a rep. I fought hard for people that I worked with. And it seems to me ironic what was very basic to working people back in the late 70s and early 80s is that you had a right to a union job. You had a right to good wages. You had a right to pensions, and you had a right to the best health care in the world. And how those basics have sort of just turned upside down, and it's not everybody that has those jobs, and it's only unionized labor that even can compete. I mean, so many people have lost pensions. So you just had the state convention. What was discussed there, and what are the hot topics for working people in 2024 as we approach this November election?
Well, that's right, Mark. We just concluded our convention, our 33rd biennial convention of the Wisconsin AFL-CIO in La Crosse. And La Crosse is a beautiful city to have a convention in, and a great time was had by all because we had delegates and leaders from all the different unions coming together in La Crosse to talk about our collective fight and our collective future and our plans. And we spent some time on different resolutions, really focusing our organization and focusing on what we have to do to really improve our mission. And our mission, again, is to make life better for working people, to make sure that workers have power. And the way to really achieve power is by coming together in our unions. And our convention theme was union power, union pride. And so that was prevalent throughout the 2-day convention because we know that the best way for workers to have a piece of the pie, and again, we don't want the whole pie, but we want
Why not? Why not? I mean, when I was a labor rep, I said,
right.
we could never have enough, right? Because even if you want everything, right, you can't control it, but you got to take whatever you can get.
And the idea is that we want fairness, and we want to have a bigger share of the product that we produce and the profit that is made. And we want to do that because we want to have strong families, we want to have strong communities, and strong retirements. And the way to do that, I believe the best way to do that is through strong union contracts. And so when workers come together with their coworkers to bargain contracts with their management or the company, they are able to achieve more in terms of better wages, better working conditions, better retirement security. And that is really what we are laser focused on. Now, in order to do that, we need to set the table, and some of that table setting comes with the politicians that we do elect. But when it all comes down to it, we're really about making sure that 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 people that get up and go to work every day and make this country run like we do have the ability to have good lives.
I think part of that good life is to have a say through the contract at work in terms of what are the terms and conditions of work. It's just not a pay issue, right? It's benefits, schedules. It's how do you structure your life in a meaningful way. The obviously 2024 poses labor this question. There's a national election. We have Vice President Harris running. We've had the Biden-Harris administration. And then we have state issues in terms of labor. Let's just start with how did the convention, or how are people around Wisconsin and unions looking at what happened with the Biden-Harris administration, and did we see federal legislation impact workers here in Wisconsin? I mean, did we see money hit? Did we see more union jobs?
Well, absolutely, and that's a really, really good question because when we're talking about what does our life look like under the Biden-Harris administration, and what have their policies done to affect workers, that is key right now. And as you know, we are having an election very soon. November's coming up quickly, and what we are focused on is making sure that union members and union members' families really understand the impact of who is in the White House, and also who sits in the State House as well. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, she and Joe Biden were the most pro-union administration in our history.
That's saying a lot. I mean, let's hear.
Yeah.
Convince me.
Well, they really understand that the key to a strong middle class is strong unions. And President Biden and Vice President Harris have consistently not only talked about that, not afraid to use the word unions in the general population, but also infusing that idea into every department, that every department of their administration. We were very fortunate to have the Labor Secretary, Julie Su, join us at our convention. And what she does through being the Labor Secretary has tremendous impact on working people when it comes to worker safety, when it comes to wage and hour violations, wage theft. All of these things are critical when it comes to the lives of working people. So with Kamala Harris, we have someone who is the candidate to be our next president, who has a history of showing us what she believes in terms of strong unions, and in terms of the kind of bills that are put forth. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act has put many people to work with prevailing wages, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. That's just one of the bills. We also have the CHIPS Act, the Science and Chips Act, and also, really thinking about how are we going to reinfuse and with our manufacturing base, because we certainly need to make things in America, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did focused on that in a way that past presidents have not.
I'd like to bring my little historical perspective here. I was in the mill in 1980 when a lot of my fellow workers, especially white guys I worked with, voted for Reagan and walked away from President Carter, much to their dismay, because as soon as they took over power, they started busting unions, and it's been anti-unions from the Republicans since. How is that contradiction? How's that playing out across Wisconsin right now? I mean, I know that, organized labor and union members are not monolithic in their thinking. So how do you see that playing out?
Well, that's right. And you know that in Wisconsin, we're a battleground state. We know that very clearly. Um, you know,
That's
uh,
right. It's a dead heat,
it's
purple as it comes,
as
right?
purple as it comes. And with union members, um, that's why we really focus on the policies and not the personalities in this election, and really talking about how that person that is elected our next president will impact our pocketbooks, will impact our ability to get ahead financially, and also with having good jobs. And we see that one of the things that Donald Trump has shown us with his Project 2024 is exactly his plan for working people and unions across the country.
You mean 2025?
2025.
His
Yes.
2025
Project
plan
2025.
that he's
Yes.
talking about in 2024, right? So just we'll be back to get more into detail on that. But if there's one thing in that 2025 plan that's anti-labor, what is it?
They want to make it okay to take away unions during the length of our contract, and to be able to destroy unions in America.
Did you hear that, folks? Project 2025, right from the Trump camp. It is the attack at your basic right to organize and your freedom at work. And folks that are not unionized, y'all know that if the union folks aren't making any money, you certainly aren't. This is Stephanie Bloomingdale on your Paul Revere show. I am Mark Thomsen. Hello, this is attorney Mark Thomsen. This is your Paul Revere show on Civic Media Radio Network, broadcasting across Wisconsin every Saturday at 3 p.m. Folks, we've been talking about moving Wisconsin forward, but hey, be a voter in 2024. Early voting is open now. Make a plan and vote, folks. It really, really, really matters. I am here with the president of Wisconsin's AFL-CIO, Stephanie Bloomingdale. Hello again, Stephanie. We were talking about Trump's Project 2025 and what it means for labor if Trump wins and he implements his plan. What are the dangers of this 2025?
Well, the dangers are right there in front of us with this Project 2025. And if you haven't had a chance to read all 900 pages of this document, let me give you a few highlights for working people. Because, if working people see what is the plan, then we're able to make these decisions. But this 2025 Project 2025 would make it easier for employers to get rid of workers' unions in the middle of our contracts. It would ban public employee unions altogether. It would allow states to ban labor unions. And one thing that people may not know about is that it could eliminate overtime protections. And for working people, overtime pay is very important to make sure that we have overtime pay. And it could also allow states not to follow the national minimum wage. In addition, it would eliminate the child labor rules that protect children from working in mines, meatpacking plants, and other dangerous workplaces. So,
Folks, if you study history, 2025, the Trump plan is to take working people back to the 1800s. I mean, this is treacherous stuff, right? I mean, dangerous stuff.
I mean, they really should call it Project 1825.
Yeah, I mean, no, I just listened to that. I mean, people, the 40-hour work week and overtime pay is a battle that was fought, 100 years ago. And, it should be automatic that you're working time and a half if you're working over 40. And I mean, it's just that anybody would think that businesses have the right to go steal your money again. It's, anyway, think about it, folks. Think about it. Let me ask you this, Stephanie. If we look at labor at the state level, we got new maps now, fairer maps, and there's a chance that we get rid of this gerrymandered, right-wing Republican control of the state. How does that play out for labor at the state level?
Well, we've been in a battle in Wisconsin with labor at the state level for a long time, ever since, for a long time, but since 2010, and from our former governor, Scott Walker, who really stripped a lot of labor rights away. We have a chance to turn that around in Wisconsin right now. And because of the fair maps, like you talked about, because they were rigged before, now we have new fairer maps. Working people have the chance to get representation, the majority of representation in the state assembly this November, and in the state senate in a couple of years. And the reason that we want to do that is because we want to make sure that working people's voices are heard in our state legislature. And the number one things that we want to do is to overturn Act 10, which took away collective bargaining for public sector workers. We want to get rid of the so-called right to work law that Scott Walker put in place, and Robin Voss and all of his friends. And we also want to reinstate prevailing wages and also project labor agreements. Those are top on our list, but there's many more as well. But we really are on a path and a focused on reversing those rights that were taken away by Governor Scott Walker.
You had mentioned that you had the convention up in La Crosse. The president, national president of the AFL-CIO, Liz Schuler, was there, right?
And we were very happy to have President Liz Schuler there with us in La Crosse. And she was really talking about the focus of the national AFL-CIO that she is leading to reinvigorate labor unions, to reinvigorate our goals in terms of making life better for working Americans. And she's doing an incredible job doing that by focusing us, especially in this election, by really understanding what is at stake and who we choose to be our next president of the United States.
I thought it was a pretty big deal when, you had the Secretary of Labor at the national level, Julie Sue, show up along with the president of the AFL-CIO. It seems to reflect that the world knows that Wisconsin is a major player in November at the national and the state level. Did Liz Schuler have anything like interesting to say, particularly in terms of the importance of labor and work here in Wisconsin?
Well, we know that, and what she drove home with us is that our conversations with our union members about this election are absolutely critical. There is so much disinformation out there and noise going on that those conversations that we have, union member to union member or family member, are the ones that are heard most and are most impactful on people's decision at the ballot box. So we have our work cut out for it, and we are working tirelessly every day to make sure that union members know that Kamala Harris is on our side as union people and as workers.
The what is we have we're what I don't should have counted the days, but we're down close to 30 days now, or getting there. 30 days from the election. What's the key thing for people that are interested in unions and working people to do?
To really think about who's on our side. I mean, Donald Trump, we know what he did when he was in office, and he gave huge tax cuts to the top 1%. That's what he did. So he gave away tax cuts to rich corporations and the richest amongst us. And we saw what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did was really focus on working people and building a strong, robust middle class.
Folks, check it out. Check out what labor has to say. Think long and hard about who you're going to vote for, but register to vote. If you're not registered, get your neighbors to vote and vote. And folks, vote pro-union, vote Harris Walls all day long. This is your Paul Revere Show. Hello, folks. This is attorney Mark Thomsen. This is your Paul Revere Show on Civic Media Radio Network, broadcasting across Wisconsin every Saturday at 3 p.m. We have been talking about moving Wisconsin forward. How do we keep it going ahead? And how perfect is it to have Darryl Morin, a forward Latino, to talk to us today. Hello, Darryl. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you doing today?
You're here, so life is perfect. So, tell me, Forward Latino, what's its mission? Darryl Morin, what's your role in it? And then we'll get into how that impacts 2024.
Well, wonderful. Well, first, thanks for having me here, Mark. Really appreciate it. Forward Latino was actually started back in 2019, so we're relatively a new organization. But I think you could say there's been a demand for what we do because we now have members and affiliates across 29 states across the country. And I could go into our long, detailed mission, but let me just tell you, it's about doing everything we can to help each and every American be able to achieve the American dream.
So that gives me the huge global mission. In Wisconsin, what is Forward Latino focused on?
Boy, we're doing everything right now from obviously engaging in civic engagement, making sure that all Latinos are allowed to participate and have access to the polls and do so and are knowledgeable on all the issues. Sadly, every election cycle, we wind up spending a lot of time helping hate crime victims, sadly, because of the inflammatory rhetoric there seems to be around elections these past several cycles. We also do things like advocate and work on issues such as education reforms, access to healthcare, immigration policy, obviously, and the list goes on and on. And in fact, here in a couple of weeks, we're going to be holding the state's largest gun violence prevention event right here in downtown Milwaukee, where people are going to be coming in from all over the state to talk about gun violence and how it's impacting all of our communities. It's not just a Milwaukee thing, it's occurring in every county across the state. So we're going to be having a very serious discussion on that as well.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the Attorney General, Josh Call, is going to be in attendance.
Yeah, Josh Call will be here, Attorney General Josh Call. There's going to be a couple of surprise guests who are not able to announce publicly. But we're also going to have another very special guest that we're flying in. It's a young lady who lost her fourth grade daughter, Lexi, at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. So, boy, I've heard her speak before, and it's just so compelling. And for any parent out there who has a child going to school, I think we can all empathize with that fear of turning on the TV and seeing, that thing that you pray never happens happen.
So let's talk about the the Latino vote is discussed often, but in Wisconsin, the Latino vote is a diverse group, but numerically it is the group of residents, citizens. The numbers are just increasing, and they have a huge impact on Wisconsin's economy. How do you see those factors playing out when we talk about the issues that people face in November for this election?
Sure. Well, I can tell you in the last statewide election, which was in 2022, we did civic engagement outreach to just under 70,000 eligible Latino voters here in the state, making sure they were aware of what photo ID was required to be able to vote, where their voting places were, clarifying things, and sometimes when needed in Spanish, et cetera, to get everybody out. And I can tell you unequivocally that if it wasn't for, the huge turnout of the Latino electorate, things would have been the way they were. And I can definitely tell you in the last presidential election where President Biden won by slightly more than 20,000 votes, had he not won such a large percentage of the Latino vote, he would not be president right now.
So, what are the issues across the state that are really impacting where people and Latinos in particular are looking and picking who their candidate's going to be?
Well, I'll share this with you. First off, there's the Latino vote is a huge diverse block, right? And let me say
Right.
Latino slash Hispanic vote. And to clarify for folks, Latino is if you're a person who comes from a Latin American country. You're Hispanic if you come from a country that predominantly speaks Spanish. So my family's lineage goes back to Mexico, so we're both Latino and Hispanic. So just to clarify a little bit there, but people often talk about us as a monolithic voting bloc. Not the case. Depending on what your nation of origin is, what kind of government it had and how effective and how much equity was there in that country really impacts what your leanings are going to be like when you're here in the United States. Also makes a difference, are you first generation, second generation, or third generations, because your priorities begin to shift over that. But coming back to your original question, Mark, everybody always assumes immigration is the biggest issue, and I'll tell you that that's kind of like the table stakes for sitting at the poker table, right? You have to at least we at least want people who acknowledge the human decency in our contributions, et cetera, to get in the door. But the biggest issues today are by far and away the economy, access to quality healthcare and housing, and access to quality education. And then we start to fall back down into the immigration area. And I can tell you too, amongst our young people, climate change is absolutely huge. And let me also rank up there in the top three is crime slash gun violence, just because we are so impacted by that. So yeah, there's a lot of issues here, and people are clamoring to learn more from the candidates on those issues.
So, as forward Latino out there in the community on the issues, how do these issues get teed up? Is the Harris campaign, the Trump campaign? What are
So
the comparisons?
yeah. So I'll share this. First off, since we're a 501c3, we're not allowed to endorse a candidate or a political party, et cetera. But we are able to do is take positions on different policies. For instance, back when the former president was in office, and he had signed an executive action instructing border agents to separate children, sometimes infants in many cases, away from their parents. We were very strong in our condemnation of that policy and calling for reversal and dismissal. That was simply, I was down at the border. I saw it happen. It was simply gut wrenching. And there's a misconception too amongst too many that Hispanics or Latinos, want open borders. Not the case. Everybody understands the need to be able to secure our borders. But everybody also realizes we need to be able to do that in a humane way, et cetera, as well as make sure that we have the workforce flow that our economy needs if it's going to continue to prosper and grow. So I think you'll find that by and large throughout the Latino community, everybody understands the need to secure our borders, et cetera. But I think the big difference that we see and we hear from our constituency is the different approaches that are being taken by the suggested by the vice president, as well as what we've seen done by the previous president.
Did Forward Latino weigh in on this whole? There was the bill in Congress that a coalition of Biden Harris had put it forward to have immigration reform. Many Republican senators had joined it. Did Forward Latino have a position on that bill?
We did, and we were very clear in our conversations with the White House over this. We weren't fans of everything in the bill. That being said, we know that something needed to be done, and we were pleased that once again, this president, like he has so many times, was able to strike a compromise with Republican leadership. Sadly, right before it was to be voted on, the former president started making calls into leadership in Congress and promptly killed it. And not only was that frustrating from the perspective of, here we know that there's challenges, that we're seeing on the border, and here he's been scapegoating immigrants. He's been talking about this need to do something, that he killed everything that he essentially had been asking for. But all this inflammatory rhetoric around it, there was a debate, the first presidential debate between him and current President Joe Biden, where he started once again just making out, and I'm just going to say it, lies, false statements, talking about how people are opening up their prisons and insane asylums and sending them to the United States. The next day, a gentleman, a neighbor to a Hispanic family in Crete, Nebraska, opened fire and shot every member of that family. Right. And this is something that we are continuing to see with all this inflammatory rhetoric. That was heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Luckily, none of them died. The man took his own life, so the police couldn't ascertain precisely why he did what he did. But they had written him up a number of times before for using a lot of terminology that the former president uses. So that, along with a lot of the anti-immigrant hate crime cases that we work on, just really makes it tough to stomach, some of the things we hear.
As you go around Wisconsin, and frankly, as you go around in the 29 states you're in, how widespread has this hate reaction and attack on Latinos, Hispanics, other folks of color? Have you seen an increase?
Oh, definitely. And so has the FBI. And you'll see it in the crime stats. And not only has it been against the Hispanic community, but you'll see it against the African American community, the Jewish communities, the Asian populations, et cetera. And it's very concerning. I here in Milwaukee, I can only talk about the cases where we've been granted approval by the victims to talk about it. But I think everyone's familiar with the acid attack of Mayor Villas that happened right here in Milwaukee, right? United States citizen walking into a restaurant is asked why he's invading the country and told to leave, and had acid thrown in his face. Shortly thereafter, we were called into a case just outside of Des Moines, Iowa. 14-year-old girl walking to school, Natalia Miranda, right? A woman is in her SUV, stopped at a stoplight, sees her, steps on the gas, jumps the curb, and begins to pursue this girl who sees her coming and is trying to dodge her. And she keeps going and driving through front yards until she runs over this 14-year-old girl going to school. And the police asked her why she did that. She said, well, she's an illegal. I had to try to kill her. And once again, a United States citizen. So we are seeing these things play out time and time again all across the country. And no American, right, should have to deal with that. No American should fear having to speak maybe their first language, right, or receive death threats over such things. When you stop to think of what our country really is supposed to stand for, it's definitely not that. It's about freedom. It's about freedom, not oppression, not racial discrimination, and not hate. And sadly, when we hear these things being said so publicly and with such a large microphone, it has an impact on people in the country.
No, I think your point on. I mean, it completely is a reversal of who we are as a people. And, you know, I grew up being taught that the Statue of Liberty, this is where we welcome the world. Look, my my grandfather, great grandfather, came from Denmark. They were immigrants, right? Unless you were essentially a slave brought here, you were an immigrant if you weren't a Native American. And
Exactly.
it's like this irony. Darryl Morin, Forward Latino. We'll be back to talk more about what Forward Latino has to say in 2024. Folks, this is Attorney Mark Thomsen. This is your Paul Revere show here on Civic Media Radio Network, broadcasting across the state every Saturday at 3 p.m., folks. Forward, Wisconsin. Hello, folks. This is Attorney Mark Thomsen. This is your Paul Revere show. I'm here with Darryl Morin of Forward Latino. We're talking about how Forward Latino is keeping this great state of Wisconsin moving forward. I mean, I got to love that motto. So, Darryl, we have this major election coming up in November. We've talked about the importance of the Latino Hispanic vote, but we really haven't talked about the efforts. There's been a lot of suppression attempts. What can you tell us, from around the country and in Wisconsin? What do you see happening on that issue?
Well, we're seeing tactics that were first used, 8 years ago, coming back all over again. We saw what happened when the photo ID law was put into place, and I'll never forget that. I was my first election after that was put in place, and I went to go vote, and there were two elderly gentlemen, United States veterans, who had mobility issues, who weren't allowed to vote that day. Because people said we needed to protect our elections, et cetera, even though there'd been, millions and millions of dollars spent to investigate all the supposed fraud, only to find out there was none. And here you had two men who risked their life serving their nation, and they weren't able to vote. And fast forward to today, it seems like the most popular thing to do is to challenge the citizenship of voters in trying to purge people off of the voter rolls, because everyone understands, like I said, the last presidential election here was won by just over 20,000 votes. So any skewing one way or the other can literally determine the outcome of the election. So we're seeing, actually just today, the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate finally were able to pass a temporary spending bill that was held up because the former president was insisting that proof of citizenship requirements be added to every voting role here in the United States. And so he was willing to hold up everything, once again, shut down our federal government in order to get that there. We've seen actions.
I just want to touch on that and just talk about that a little bit. So you have to be a citizen to be registered to vote to begin with.
Correct.
So I voted for years and years and years in Wisconsin by just showing up down the street at my polling place with my neighbors who knew me, and I was registered. No one ever asked me for an ID ever. And for years and years and years, there was never any fraud, of any significant numbers, right, on this issue. So fast forward. Now you have to go, and now you got to pull out your ID. We went through all the litigation in 2016 and 20, 18, 20. I mean, that battle was waging for a long, long time. What it meant, you had to have an ID. Federal courts intervene and said, okay, you can have a special ID. You can get it. So you could still register to vote that day. But we know everybody that's in the registered to vote is a citizen already. We all know that you have to be a citizen to vote. And then to talk about this as if we need to redo it or re-say it, to me is it's the biggest lie out there, because it implies somehow that citizens, right, haven't been always just voting. And how is that playing out? I mean, because it creates such confusion out there.
And that's absolutely right. It does create confusion. And imagine showing up. And right now, I can share with you. And this is well documented. There's nonprofits that are popping up, just literally inundating election officials with claims of voter irregularity. So they're being forced to literally go through thousands of folks to re-authenticate them, to use a term. But imagine showing up. I show up to a polling place, and my name has been removed or marked question, and the person tells me, "Okay, well, just show us proof of citizenship." Right? Most people don't have easy access to proof of citizenship. And even if they did, how many people do you think are actually going to go home, get it, and come back? So, we view this as just another voter suppression effort used to create confusion, used to create fear, quite honestly, as well, to drive people away from the polls. When people are more willing to deny a lawful voter their right to vote, than risk an infinitesimal, a small percentage of somebody who may be voting who shouldn't be. It just makes no sense. And the only logical conclusion one can come to is that it's being done to be able to give an advantage to one side over the other.
But I think too the point that you make, it's designed to harass and slow down the process. If you show up and you're a registered voter, your name is on the polls. That means you've already proved you were a citizen. To allow someone then, under the name of being an observer, to challenge that or make you redo it again, that is just obstructing the person's right to vote, because it just slows down the line. It intimidates people, and people hear about it and they get afraid. And the other thing is, your neighbors, seniors that have historically just gone there to work at the polls, are now harassed and threatened, and all under the guise of somehow looking for this fake thing.
The hypocrisy underneath this too is, I wish the same legislators that have done this would have spent the same amount of time and energy trying to make sure that people would not try to become fake electors again, right? And essentially dismiss the people's earnest vote, legal vote in the state, so that they get the outcome they want.
Folks, Darryl Morin of Forward Latino, thank you so much, Darryl. Think about these issues. Think about how it impacts your life. Get your neighbors to register to vote. Go vote. Help people vote. Trust your neighbors, folks. We have to overcome this time of fear and darkness. This is Attorney Mark Thomsen. This is the Paul Revere Show. Forward, always forward, Wisconsin. Thank you, Forward Latino.
Thank you, Mark.